The night the news first broke, most people scrolling through their phones paused only for a moment, long enough to read the headline, long enough to feel their stomach tighten, long enough for the world to feel a little colder. But for the people who knew Sam Nordquist, the headline wasn't just a story. It was the end of a life that had been fighting for breath long before it was taken. Sam was 24, young enough to still be building himself, old enough to know who he was becoming. Those who loved him remembered his laugh, too loud, too sudden, too contagious. He had the kind of humor that came from surviving things most people never talked about, and the kind of kindness that felt deliberate, practiced, almost defiant, like he chose gentleness every day in a world that didn't always choose it back. He was a trans man in a world that often demanded explanations he never owed. But he carried himself with quiet certainty. He had dreams of moving to a bigger city, of starting a small business, of building a life far from the shadows of his past. He spoke often about wanting a home filled with plants, warm light, and the kind of silence that felt safe. But in the months leading to his death, something in Sam began to dim. His closest friend, Leo, noticed first. She remembered small things: the way Sam's messages became shorter, the way he canceled plans, the way his voice trembled during phone calls. She suspected stress, maybe depression, maybe exhaustion. She didn't know he was living in fear. She didn't know he was trapped. The investigation would later reveal that Sam endured long-term abuse before he died. Abuse meant to break a person slowly, methodically, piece by piece. Not just physical harm, but psychological torment, deprivation, a stripping away of autonomy and safety. Prosecutors said he was isolated, intimidated, and controlled. He was harmed in ways designed to make escape impossible. And his cries for help likely went unheard. What Sam survived before his death will never be fully known. That truth belongs only to him now, and to the dark spaces between the lines of the police report, spaces too heavy for strangers to hold fully, too violent to imagine without doing harm to his memory. But what mattered, what echoed long after, was this: Sam fought. He fought to stay alive. He fought to hold on to hope. He fought to keep pieces of himself safe even as the world around him frayed. When authorities finally uncovered the truth and arrests were made, the shock rippled far beyond the small community where Sam lived. For many Americans, the case became more than a crime. It became a mirror reflecting how vulnerable people can become. Lost in plain sight, reporters covering the story described Sam's life in fragments: his identity reduced to a headline, his suffering summarized in a sentence. But the people who loved him refused to let him be remembered as just a victim. They told stories. His mother spoke about his childhood, how he used to line up toy cars on the living room floor and name each one like they were members of his family. She remembered the first time he cooked dinner for the household, burning the pasta but insisting everyone eat it anyway because effort counts more than taste. She remembered the way he hugged her after he came out as trans, whispering, "I hope you're proud." She told him she always was. His younger brother described how Sam taught him to ride a bike. How Sam ran alongside him in the park, cheering too loudly, startling joggers. How he got scraped knees from diving to catch his brother when he tipped too far. "He never let me fall," his brother said. Not once. Friends recalled how Sam would show up at 2 a.m. with snacks if someone texted that they were having a bad night. How he wrote birthday letters instead of buying cards. How he really tried to be someone the world could trust. The tragedy was not only that Sam died, it was that he died knowing cruelty no person should ever face. Yet the community that gathered after his death made a choice to grieve loudly, to demand justice, to refuse the silence that often surrounds cases like his. Candles were lit, names were chanted, posters were raised with Sam's photograph printed in soft tones, his eyes gentle, his smile hopeful. People stood shoulder to shoulder, strangers suddenly connected through collective heartbreak. One of the advocates at a vigil said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. Sam deserved so much more than survival. He deserved joy, and that truth hung in there like a promise the world still owed. As details of the case emerged, the country reacted with a mixture of outrage, sorrow, and disbelief. Social media erupted with questions: how could this happen? Why wasn't someone there sooner? How did no one notice the signs? Why are vulnerable people still falling through cracks large enough to swallow entire lives? Amid the anger, grief settled deep in the bones of those who read his story. Even people who had never met Sam felt the weight of it. Something about the cruelty he endured struck a chord, not just because it was horrific, but because it echoed a broader fear that society too often overlooks those who struggle quietly. His death sparked uncomfortable conversations about the treatment of transgender individuals, about abuse that hides behind closed doors, about the systems that fail victims long before the worst happens, about the frightening reality that monsters rarely look like monsters when the suspects were arrested. It didn't bring closure, not really. Justice is slow, imperfect, incomplete. Courtrooms can't undo harm, trials can't resurrect hope, but accountability matters. And people demanded it fiercely. In the months that followed, Sam's case became a symbol, a heartbreaking reminder of the violence many endure in silence, and the responsibility communities share in protecting the vulnerable. Activists spoke his name in rallies, journalists wrote follow-ups, and his family fought to keep the conversation alive, ensuring that what happened to him would not be forgotten. Because Sam's story was not just a tragedy. It was a call. A call to listen more closely. To notice what isn't said. To believe survivors. To intervene when something feels wrong. To build a world where kindness is not something people fight for, but something they are surrounded by. There are people who survive horrors and remain invisible. Sam should never have been one of them. His memory now lives in the hearts of those who heard his story and refused to look away. He lives in the protests demanding better protections. He lives in the quiet moments when someone checks on a friend, or intervenes, or calls for help. He lives in every tear shed for someone taken too soon, and every vow that says, never again. And he lives in the simple truth his mother repeated at every interview: he was loved. He mattered. He still does. And in the end, Sam Nordquist's life was more than the cruelty that ended it. His story, painful as it is to hear, continues to move strangers into action, communities into unity, and a nation into reflection. And though his voice was stolen, his impact born of grief, resilience, and the fierce love of those who knew him will echo long after the headlines fade.